What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV. Today, I'm going to be breaking down the debate between owner of Valuetainment Patrick Bet-David and astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. Specifically, we're going to be looking at some of the most important moments from this debate, and I'm going to be showing you exactly how Patrick Bet-David used his unbelievable communication skills to expose Neil deGrasse Tyson. There is a lot to be learned from this exchange, so without further ado, let's get into the clips.
From what we knew at the beginning of COVID to what we know today, what do we know about the vaccine today that we didn't know while we were all testing it in America, taking it? What have we learned now?
What do you mean testing it on America? There were tests before it was released.
9 months is not a long time to test.
No, but it was tested.
Yeah, but 9 months. The average is 30. The average is 5 to 10 years. I mean, 9 months is not enough.
Okay, so you have to
test.
No, you have to ask. Hold on. It was tested in trials. Okay. By the way, I'm not claiming to be the expert on all this. I read all the same things you have, but I'm a scientist, so I read it as a scientist, okay? There were trials. That's what the point of phase 1, 2, 3 trials are all about. They are tested enough to get data on how to then advise the larger population. Yes, it was tested. For you to say it wasn't tested is a gap between your awareness and understanding how things work and what actually happened.
Now, there's a very interesting dynamic going on in this conversation because Pat Bet-David, he's former military, he's a CEO, he's conquered the boardrooms, he's an alpha male. But Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's kind of an alpha male too, and he's definitely a conversational bully. You'll see how much he constantly cuts Pat off. You'll see the emotional reaction and how his body flares up, whereas Pat is nice and calm. And this is the difference between the two. Neil is acting on emotion, whereas Pat is calculated and cerebral about what he's saying. Pat understands that in order for this to be a productive conversation, he needs to play to Neil's ego. And it's a big ego.
It was tested. If you want it to be tested on millions of people instead of thousands, you can put in for that. You can say, I don't want this unless it's millions. That's okay.
Totally fine with me.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
That's fine. So based on that, do you say, let's keep testing it while the virus keeps spreading? Okay? Right. So this is the contest between the information you have available to you at that moment and what's going on outside the lab. People are dying. Hospitals are becoming overloaded. So do you say we have good data on the 1,000? It's not yet at 1 million in case you wanted 1 million. Are you going to say, let's still do it let's wait another 6 months so we get another 1 million in here? Will you do that as a public health professional?
No, I would have said, allow the individual to still have a choice that's okay with 1,000 instead of a few million. Leave the person have the choice. Not force him to take it or else you're going to get out of the Marines and you've been doing this for 14 years. Not force him to take it or else you have to quit your job as a nurse.
There's a public health
force versus
there's a
choice.
There's a public health contract that you have signed implicitly as a citizen of a country where in part we depend on each other for health, our wealth, our security, and the like. And that contract is, in the best scientific evidence available at the time, if you do not get vaccinated, you will put other people in this organization at risk, and that organization does not want to take that risk. So you do not have this job anymore if you decline it. So with any public health decision, there has to be a consequence to you not participating in that social contract. Is it your job? In some cases it was. But no, we're not going to have the army bust into your home and force a needle into your shoulder. That's not going to happen.
We pretty much did that.
Well, only put your job at risk, yes.
Yeah, 67% of Americans took the COVID. That's force. That's not a choice. That's a lot of force and coercing and pushing going on. But you can't go to the school unless you're vaccinated against mumps. I think that's bullshit.
That's a different country.
Yeah. But
okay, would you want a country?
No, America is supposed to be the one that offers the most freedom. That's what America is supposed to be.
Yeah, okay, so watch.
So for example, if you use that argument, somebody may say, well, freedom of choice, I want to choose what I want to do with the body. You're right.
What body?
if you want to get an abortion. It's your choice.
Your own body. Your own body.
If you want to get an abortion, get an abortion. If I want to get the vaccine, I get to choose. So you can't force. If I can't force you to get an abortion, you shouldn't be able to force me to get
Because it's not about you. It's about people you interact with, and that's the social contract of public health.
We don't even know if the vaccine worked or not at the time.
Yes, that's what the trials are, dude. That's why these trials. Are you missing data out there?
But this is just embarrassing for a scientist to be having such a visceral reaction like this in a conversation. And he's arguing these points about a social contract and how it's not about your choice and how they did the tests and the data were there. And it's almost sad to see because he's objectively wrong about this. And I think that Neil deGrasse Tyson is really not used to having his worldview challenged. He's always been the guy who's on TV and he's such an exalted figure, the astrophysicist. And you can really tell that that has gotten to his head because as soon as somebody like Patrick Bet-David, a guy from Iran who's a businessman, not a scientist or anything, starts questioning him, he starts to shame him and insult him. I'm interested to know how you guys feel about this because I've always loved Neil deGrasse Tyson. I actually met him when I used to be a waiter when I was 19. He actually came into the restaurant and I served him and his family and he was super cool. I read his book, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. It feels weird to be criticizing him like this because I've always been such a fan, but I feel like he's just not doing himself any favors with the lack of humility.
Let me ask you a question. Are we saying only one type of scientists are right?
No, we're saying that the system in place.
The 16,000 that signed that.
No. The system in place to test vaccines, there's an entire system that's in place. That with review boards and all of this,
and the average
that's in place. Now you can say what you can say is, I have a better idea than all these review boards and all these agencies and the CDC. I have a better idea. Here's what you should do, and that would have made everything better. Okay, you can put forth that idea, but what I'm saying is, in a case where you can contaminate someone else, it's not about you. It's about the collective
You're assuming
health.
You're assuming because somebody can take the vaccine, won't get COVID, which, by the way, I don't need to play the clips for you to see it, where everybody said, hey, if you get it, you're not going to get, if you take the vaccine, you're not going to get a Rachel Maddow, Joe Biden. I can give you Fauci. I can give you, and you've seen these clips before. It's not like you've never seen it before.
Yeah, what happened
They were wrong.
Hold on. So, the strain evolved, okay?
We get it. You're brilliant. You're an astrophysicist. You were following the data at the time. No judgment whatsoever. But just admit that you were wrong and admit that the people saying that they wanted to have the freedom of choice were right.
So these annual flu shots are precisely out of the same idea of how this occurs.
How long have those been tested, though? For years. COVID vaccine hasn't been tested for it. It was something we just came out. But let me.
I don't know what point you're making, other than it was tested. You might
9 months is not enough.
You might prefer. No, it's not a matter of time. It's a matter of how many. Yes, time matters, but the number of people is paramount. That's the most important thing. Okay, you don't test it on 10 people. You test it on as many people as you can.
Sure.
Now I want you to watch in the next exchange what Pat does. At the start of this exchange, he qualifies the question again. He says, is it fair to say X? And then what he does is he asks Neil a calibrated open-ended question. What this is a very carefully assessed open-ended question. Normally they start with how or why. And the purpose of this is to give the person that you're speaking to the illusion of control. Even though you're steering the direction of the conversation and you're asking the question, you're playing to their ego by making it seem like they're solving the problem. And if you do this right, you can actually control the direction of the conversation and lead the other person to your point of view whilst maintaining that illusion of control and making it feel like it was their decision to go there. Now, by the way, guys, these techniques that he's using, the top negotiators in the FBI use these calibrated open-ended questions. And there's a fantastic book about this by an FBI negotiator called Never Split the Difference. I can't remember what his name is off the top of my head, but I will leave the Audible and the paperback link in the bio for that book. Well worth the read if you're interested in that stuff.
I think it was thousands, but
is it fair to say that some of the side effects we may not know for 5, 10, 15, 20 years? You can't, like, they can't say we know 100% the side effects 10 years from now. How are you going to know that?
Yeah, okay. So no, of course, we can't know that.
Then
your decision point is not, I'm not going to take the virus because 5 years, 10 years, I don't know what effect it's going to have.
Some may, though. Some may not be comfortable with
Let me finish the sentence.
Yes, you did just see that. Neil deGrasse Tyson asked Pat to let him finish his sentence.
Okay. So you can say, I don't want to take the virus because 5 or 10 years from now, there could be a side effect that we don't see.
Which is a possibility.
Hold on. I'm trying to make a statistical point here, okay? If you say, I don't want to take the virus because it hasn't been tested for 5 years and there could be some long-term side effect that worries me, okay? In that same moment, there's the risk factor of you getting COVID.
Sure.
Okay? Unvaccinated. At one point, 87% of everyone dying in the hospital of COVID was unvaccinated. Okay. So your risk choice is, I'm not going to take it because maybe somewhere down the line something will happen and we don't know what that is, or I will risk getting COVID. And if I get COVID, depending on your age and other things, there's a 3% chance of me dying in the hospital. That's your choice. Yes.
Okay, no worries. That's not what he's saying, though. What he's saying is that you should have the choice. And Neil here is talking about the risks of it. Sure, for a certain demographic of people, it is very risky. But taking the poke is not going to stop transmission. That's what they're talking about here. So it's all well and good for you to say that there are risks involved, and fantastic. If there are risks involved and you want to try and mitigate that risk by taking it, absolutely. But don't impose that on everyone else if it actually won't affect you what other people do. It's not quantum mechanics.
Should the individual not have the right to say, I don't want to take it because that's
you don't have the right to contaminate someone else. So if you don't want to get shot,
who says that though? But who says that?
It's a social contract in a modern civilization.
I don't have
for public health.
I don't have the right to contaminate someone else. In what do you mean? Like, so what do I do? Stay home all day?
Yeah, or it's go to the beach. Yeah, you stay away from other old people who
but
you stay away from people who are immune compromised.
So Neil, so for me, I'm asking you because I want to know how you process this as a guy that's well-read, smart.
I process the data, and the data.
We didn't have enough data, though.
No,
we didn't have enough data
at any given moment.
Yeah,
there's.
Patrick is really doing a good job here. I mean, once again there, he plays to Neil's ego. He gives him a compliment, says he's a smart guy, he's a well-read guy, and then Neil just cuts him off again. This really goes to show, though, in my opinion, that Pat is a guy who's used to being around egos. He's been in the boardrooms before. He's been at the top of the corporate ladder. So he knows very well how to manage these situations, and that's why he's so successful. Neil, he kind of comes across like he's just used to getting pats on the back all the time.
All I'm saying is the following. Like, okay, for example, statistics. Have you seen the documentary Died Suddenly? Have you looked at it?
No, I haven't.
Okay. It's an interesting one. It's on I don't know where it's at. You can find it somewhere online. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
It's got 30 million views. I think it's worth watching. Actually would be curious to know what you say about it once you watch it.
Mm-hmm.
The statistic then showed like pre-COVID, 29 athletes in Europe died suddenly from heart failure, pre-COVID, pre-taking the mRNA vaccine. Okay. Post-taking the mRNA vaccine last year, 1,500 people suddenly had heart failures in Europe and 2/3 died. That's documented. That's not like it's a hypothetical, right? Okay, you read statistics like that, then one has the right to say.
Well, just to be careful. You have to be careful how you speak information.
Neil telling Pat to be careful how he speaks information is like me going and telling Lionel Messi, be careful how you kick that football. And you can see there, that's the first time that the frustrations really boiled over in Pat's body language. He actually has a physical reaction to hearing that because he knows how hypocritical it is coming from Neil.
You have to be careful how you speak information. So you are describing two events, okay? You're describing events that had a temporal relationship, okay, before you've established a causal relationship. Just be clear that's
100%. I'm not doing that. All I'm doing is the following. Here's all I'm doing. If somebody all of a sudden starts having a breakout, okay,
a breakout of what?
Meaning their skin starts breaking out. You're 26 years old. You never had a breakout. All of a sudden you start breaking out. And the doctor says, listen, man, what have you been doing differently? Well, listen, for the first time in my life, 6 weeks ago, I started doing DECA, steroids. Well, okay, that's why it implicates it, right? Okay. Hey, if somebody all of a sudden, is having a hard time sleeping at night, I'm having a very hard time. So let's watch your diet. Well, then they notice at 10:30 at night, you're having iced tea and, lemonade, and you add it with this. Well, listen, if we've been doing it for 6 weeks, that's why you're having a hard time. Just drop that. Don't drink that after 2 o'clock. I'm just making, saying, but all I'm saying is, what I want to know is I want to put everything on the table versus saying, no, there's one thing we can't put on the table, and that's the cause of the vaccine. There is no way there could be any negative impact because of the vaccine. That's
No one
ludicrous.
has ever said that ever about any vaccine.
If you say that, then the question then becomes back for you to say, when COVID first got started, I invited so many doctors to come in to talk about COVID. And then I invited people from both sides. I want both sides. I invited people from both sides. You know which side would never come? The side that was for vaccine would never, ever come because they thought they were above the average person, that they know and the rest of us are dumb. So because of that, they're not willing to come and sit down with scientists. I think that's arrogant. So to me, when I ask you scientific debate, I'm not telling you I'm a scientist. Hey, let me debate with you because I'm smarter than you. I'm not a scientist.
Now, I don't know if Pat did this intentionally, but to me, it seemed like that was maybe a little bit of a revenge shot from when Neil called him out about the way he speaks words. Hopefully you guys would have caught that, but Pat basically just in a roundabout way called Neil arrogant because he's basically saying those establishment science figures think they're better than everyone else. So they won't actually engage with and take the concerns of normal people seriously.
I'm a business guy.
Let's do a hypothetical scenario. Hypothetics are, let's assume an actual cause and effect has been established in this case.
Sure.
Which it's not have to see this film to know. I don't know that there's a cause and effect other than a coincidence in time relative to other things that people might have been doing. By the way, alcohol consumption went up during COVID significantly. Okay, and alcohol is implicated in heart disease. So
depression, anxiety, people staying at home,
kids, opioid
addicts, addiction. Okay. So the staying at home wasn't the best decision either.
What I'm saying is, if after the vaccine is available, more people die of heart failure over a time where alcohol consumption went up, as did depression.
That could be an option.
That's right.
That's a very good
point. That's all I'm saying here. But let's give it to you that the vaccine caused this. Let's just say that. Okay?
Yeah.
And add it all up, and you got, what was it, 1,500 post-vaccine?
29 to 1,500.
29 deaths.
29 sports deaths, 1,500.
Thousands of deaths, let's say. Okay? Let's say 10,000 even. Let's just do that. Okay. All right. You can estimate how many deaths the vaccine saved during COVID. Okay, because you can look at the death numbers drop off as people got vaccinated. It's in the tens of millions. Again, you can make a decision. Do I not want to die from COVID at this rate that occurred in this world? Or do I not want to die from this complication from the vaccine itself, the heart failure? So make your decision. And so you'll say, I might be in that 1,500, so I'm not going to take. Then you get COVID and die from COVID, right? So you just make the decision.
You know what I would say to that? Well, you know what I would say to that?
What would you say?
Here's what I would say to that. I would say, perfect. Let me take the risk. And thank you for giving it to me that way versus telling me it's one or the other, which is how it was presented.
You are informed fully about what the risks are. But like I said, as a species, we're not very good at thinking statistically about it. We're just not.
Absolute 10-7 for Pat there. Sure, okay, maybe it did save all these people. But what he's talking about is athletes. Athletes aren't dying from the rising consumption of alcohol or any of these other factors. They're athletes. They're young. They're healthy. That's what he was talking about. Once again, it comes back to choice. And then, do you know what I would say to that? Do you know what I'd say to that? What would you say? Here's what I would say to that. That was a great moment. I don't know if you guys appreciate that as much as I do, but just such a charismatic way to qualify what you're about to say before you challenge someone. And then Pat just dunks on him, keeps it nice and simple, concise, doesn't try and make this whole roundabout, fluffy argument like Neil keeps doing, and just drives his point home. A really good point. And then Neil actually acquiesces to it. And it's almost a little bit of a yield, about as much of a yield as you'll get from a guy like Neil. And then last of all, when he says, as a species, we're not that good at thinking about these things, to me, that just sounds like a cop-out. That's a way of saying, I know how to think about this. I know how to analyze the data, but you peasants don't know how to do it. So you need people like me and my smart friends to make these decisions for you.
All I'm saying is from my end, in a space where I sit there and I listen to you and I learn, I say, oh my gosh, okay, I had no clue about that. That was brilliant. That's interesting. Let me go research. Let me go look at this. I'm a guy that likes debate of experts in two different sides and let them make the argument. And I'm mature enough to know the better salesman doesn't necessarily have the better argument.
Good. But let me just say that there's nothing I've said in the last half hour that is a debating point. All I'm telling you, well, you can debate whether you should